The studio lights burned hot enough to make the anchors sweat, but the nation didn't notice the heat, only the trembling breath of Miranda Vale. Her voice wavered across every television, tablet, and phone in America. People in diners, airports, emergency rooms, and living rooms paused mid-sentence as her plea filled the airwaves. If anyone at all, has seen my daughter Leah, she said, forcing steadiness into a voice already fraying at the edges, please contact the number on your screen. She's 9 years old. She may be frightened. I just want her home. Safe. A faint rustle hit her microphone when she tried to compose herself. The sound was small, almost nothing, yet millions heard it. A soft shudder, a mother fighting not to break. The anchor picked up from there, tone grave and polished. That was Miranda Vale, CEO of Vale Assurance. Controversy has followed the company in recent years, he continued, including multiple disputes over denied claims. Among the cases, papers slid. A subtle tap, the file of one Emily Reed, just a name said once and gone. But in a greasy little diner on the south side of town, that name hit like a punch to the ribs. Nolan Reed stood with a mop in hand, his back aching from another double shift. The old TV, bolted to the corner wall, flickered with Miranda's face, perfect hair, perfect suit, trembling confession. Her desperation filled the room in a way money couldn't shield. Nolan glanced up only long enough to mutter under his breath, "Yeah. Now the world cares." He clicked the remote, shutting Miranda's voice into silence. The sudden quiet made the hum of the refrigerator louder, the faint hiss of the grill sharper. Rain pattered against the diner windows, thin, cold drops tapping out a rhythm that matched the heaviness in his chest. Jamie, his 11-year-old son, looked up from a basket of napkin wrappers he was folding. "Dad, you okay? I'm fine, bud," Nolan said, but his tone didn't bother hiding the truth. Just tired. They finished cleaning, clocked out, and pushed their bikes into the misty night. Tires hissed over the wet pavement as they pedaled home through streets that smelled faintly of damp concrete and old rain gutters. The city felt heavier on nights like this, as if carrying its own sorrow. Their apartment building wasn't much, the kind of place where pipes moaned in the walls and the stairwell light had been burnt out since Thanksgiving. Tonight, rainwater dripped steadily from the metal awning, each drop hitting the concrete with a soft, hollow plink that echoed in the narrow space. As they climbed the stairs, Nolan froze. Something shifted in the shadows. A tiny sound, a sharp inhale, the kind someone makes when they're trying not to cry. Then he saw her. A small girl curled up on the second-floor landing, soaked through shivering so violently her teeth clicked. She clutched a worn ballet bag to her chest like a life raft. Her hair stuck to her face in wet strands. Her knees were scraped raw, and her eyes, wide frantic, snapped open the second she sensed them. "Hey," Nolan said softly, lifting both hands. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." She scrambled back until her spine hit the railing shoes, squeaking against the wet concrete. "Please." Her voice cracked. "Please don't call them." Jamie glanced at his father, confused. "Call who?" The girl shook her head so hard her breath came out in panicked bursts. "Don't send me back. Please. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. Just don't call them." Nolan felt something twist inside his chest. He had heard that tone before years ago in hospital corridors and whispered pleas from people life forgot to protect. Pain recognized pain. He knelt to her level. "Listen, you're freezing. How about we get you warm? First, soup, dry clothes. After that, we'll talk. Nothing's happening unless you say so." "Okay." Her lips trembled, but slowly. She gave a single, tiny nod. Inside the apartment, the air smelled faintly of leftover chicken broth and old books. Nolan set a pot on the stove, listening to the soft click of the burner, the rising hum of the flame. Jamie brought towels and one of his own sweaters, a size too big for her, but warm. The girl flinched at every sudden sound, the scrape of a chair, the clatter of a spoon. Trauma had tuned her ears too sharp. But when she wrapped her fingers around the warm mug of soup, A shaky sigh left her chest like her body finally understood safety. "What's your name?" Jamie asked. She hesitated. "Leah." The name brushed past Nolan like a breeze he didn't quite register. He was too busy watching her posture, her breathing, the way her gaze darted to the window as if expecting someone to burst through it. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "Whoever you're afraid of, they're not coming through that door tonight." Leah didn't answer, but her small shoulders softened just barely. Hours later, when exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep on their threadbare sofa, the apartment fell into a peaceful stillness, broken only by the ticking clock and the faint patter of rain easing off the roof. Jamie lowered the volume of their tiny TV, switching through channels aimlessly. Nolan leaned over to tuck a blanket around Leah when the news anchor's voice hit his ears, continuing coverage of the nationwide search for 9-year-old Leah Vale. Nolan's head snapped toward the screen. The TV zoomed in on a photo of Leah's face smiling, holding a ballet bag with a faded ribbon hanging from the zipper. The same bag now lying beside her on his sofa. His breath caught. Every muscle in his body went rigid. Jamie whispered, "Dad." I know." Nolan breathed barely a sound. On the screen, Miranda Vale's trembling voice replayed, "Please, if anyone has seen my daughter." Nolan stared at the sleeping child in his living room, the child the entire country was searching for. The child begging not to be sent back. The room felt too quiet, too small as the realization slammed into him. Leah wasn't just a lost girl. She was the lost girl. And she was asleep under his roof. Nolan barely slept. He spent most of the night sitting at the edge of the sofa listening to the faint, uneven breaths of the girl curled beneath the blanket. Every sound in the apartment felt louder than usual: the hum of the fridge, the occasional pop from the old radiator, the soft whimper Leah made whenever she shifted in her sleep. He kept hearing her plea echoing in his head. "Please, don't call them." By dawn, Nolan's thoughts had spun themselves into tight knots. Calling the police was the obvious move, what any decent citizen would do. But his gut churned with a warning he couldn't shake. He had seen too many lives destroyed by the wrong people getting involved too fast. Systems didn't always protect the vulnerable. Sometimes they crushed them. His own past was proof enough. As the first thread of morning light seeped through the blinds, Jamie emerged from his room, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, you still awake?" "Yeah." Nolan scrubbed his palms over his face. "Couldn't shut my mind off." Jamie looked at Leah sleeping, then at his father. "She's really the girl from TV, isn't she?" Nolan nodded slowly. "Yeah, bud, she is." Jamie swallowed. "So, what do we do?" It was a fair question. One Nolan didn't want to answer. He let out a long, shaky breath and finally stood. "We're not calling the police," he said. "Not yet. We're calling the people who actually matter to her." He found the hotline number posted under Miranda Vale's televised plea. Instead of dialing the public hotline, he dug into the website's deepest corner, the corporate contact directory. A line labeled Internal Family Liaison, Emergency Only. He hesitated. His finger hovered over the call button. Whatever happens next, there's no undoing it. Still, he pressed. A clipped voice answered. "Vale Assurance Internal. State your connection. My name is Nolan Reed." His voice didn't tremble, but the tension behind it was unmistakable. "I have information about Miranda Vale's daughter. I will only speak to a direct family representative. No media, no police, and no one touches the girl until I confirm she's safe. Do you understand me?" Silence. "Then we'll send someone." Nolan hung up before they could ask more. He didn't know exactly what he expected, but he definitely didn't expect that. By afternoon, the entire building buzzed like a stirred hornet's nest. Car doors thudded one after another. The low rumble of engines vibrated up through the floor. Someone shouted instructions outside. Nolan peeked through the blinds. A barricade of black SUVs lined the curb. Men in suits fanned across the walkway, their shoes hitting the pavement in synchronized thumps that pulsed through the stairwell. Radios crackled. A neighbor whispered, "Secret Service." Another answered, "No, no. That's corporate money, even scarier." Someone knocked, not politely firm, demanding, echoing down the narrow hallway of the apartment complex. Nolan opened the door. Miranda Vale stood there. Her hair was pinned but slightly out of place, like she'd fixed it 3 times and still couldn't steady her hands. Her breath hitched when she saw Leah peeking from behind Nolan, tiny fingers tangled in the hem of his shirt. "Leah." Miranda whispered the word, breaking in the center like fragile glass. But Leah flinched. She darted behind Nolan completely and gripped his shirt tighter. Miranda's face crumpled, first confusion, then hurt so sharp it was almost audible. She took one unsteady step forward before a hand stopped her. Victor. Tall, polished, and cold as steel. His voice was controlled to perfection. "We appreciate your cooperation," he said to Nolan, his gaze flicking over the shabby apartment with thinly veiled disdain. "Let's minimize complications. We'll take Leah now." "No," Nolan said calmly, positioning himself without thinking. "She's terrified. She needs to explain what happened in her own words before you rush her anywhere." "That is unnecessary," Victor replied, tone tightening. "She belongs with her family, and that's exactly why you should listen to her first," Nolan shot back. "Family listens." The tension was razor sharp. Miranda stepped forward again, ignoring Victor's raised hand. "Leah, sweetheart, please come home." But the moment she moved closer, Leah backed away, voice barely a whisper. "If he's not coming, I don't want to go." It stunned the room. Miranda's breath left her in a painful gasp. Victor looked irritated. A couple of suited men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Victor cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, perhaps we can resolve this quickly. Here." He pulled out a sleek folder, offering it like a transaction. A confidentiality agreement. A generous compensation package for your role in this situation. You sign, we part ways. No more entanglements. Jamie's eyebrows shot up. Even he understood what that meant. Nolan didn't touch the folder. "You think I did this for money?" Nolan said softly. "I didn't pull a kid out of the rain and give her soup so you could buy my silence." Miranda's eyes flickered not with offense but with something more complicated, something like recognition. Victor's smile thinned. "Then, what exactly do you want? I want her safe." Nolan looked down at Leah, who clung to him with a trembling desperation no amount of wealth could fake. "And I want someone to hear what she's trying to say." Miranda seemed to shrink, not in weakness but in guilt of a mother realizing her daughter trusted a stranger more than her. Her voice cracked. "Why is she so afraid of me?" No one answered. The room felt too tight, too still until Leah tugged on Nolan's sleeve. Her voice was small but clear. "I want him to come." Miranda froze. Victor's jaw clenched. Finally, Miranda turned to Nolan. Her voice was barely audible, stripped of power, stripped of title, just raw, human pleading. "I need you to come with us." The words hung there, heavy, impossible, inevitable. And, for the first time since this nightmare began, Nolan felt something unfamiliar stirring beneath the exhaustion and old bitterness responsibility. Not for the corporation, not for Miranda, for the frightened little girl who trusted him more than anyone else in the room. The ride to the Vale estate felt less like transportation and more like entering another world. The SUV hummed with a low mechanical purr, its interior too quiet, too polished, too cold. Nolan sat beside Leah, who clung to his sleeve with the same anxious grip she'd had in the apartment. Jamie sat across from them, eyes wide, taking everything in the tinted windows, the murmured radio exchanges from the trailing cars, the faint scent of leather and antiseptic that spoke of wealth trying desperately to smell clean. When the caravan finally slowed, Nolan heard the smooth hiss of the automatic gate long before he saw it. A soft, metallic sigh. then the rhythmic click of security boots pacing along the driveway. Miranda sat in the front seat, stiff and silent, her breath barely audible. Even without looking at her, Nolan could feel the tension radiating off her like static. The SUV rolled to a stop. As the doors opened, a burst of cool air swept inside, carrying the faint scent of manicured hedges and damp pavement. Leah stiffened instantly. Nolan instinctively placed a hand on her back. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm right here." They stepped out into a courtyard so wide it swallowed their footsteps. No sound lingered for long. Every noise seemed to echo and dissolve in the open space. For Nolan, the quiet felt almost accusatory. Jamie stuck close, unusually silent. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere changed again. Their shoes thudded against stone floors polished so smooth they seemed to swallow the warmth from their soles. A hush settled over the hallways, not peaceful, but expectant. Even the air felt rehearsed, expensive, controlled. Leah stayed glued to Nolan's side. A woman appeared from a corridor, the nanny. Her voice floated out first, soft and honeyed. "Leah, sweetheart. You're home?" But Nolan caught at an undertone in her words, something tight and practiced. Leah's fingers dug into his shirt. "No," Leah whispered, almost inaudible. "Not her." Miranda's posture faltered at the child's reaction. It was subtle, but Nolan heard the breath she drew in sharp and wounded. "We have trauma specialists waiting," Miranda said quietly, her voice steadier than her eyes. "They're gentle. They're safe. I promise." The sessions began almost immediately. In a soft-lit room filled with plush chairs and quiet voices, trauma therapists tried coaxing Leah to speak, but she barely lifted her eyes until Nolan entered. Suddenly, she shifted, leaning slightly toward him as though he were an anchor she'd finally found again. "Would you like Mr. Reed to stay during the session?" one therapist asked gently. Leah nodded. Miranda blinked, startled. Victor, observing through the glass pane, tightened his jaw, but no one objected, not when Leah's fear was still palpable. Nolan took a seat beside her. He wasn't trained for this, no degree, no certification. But sometimes healing came from familiarity, not credentials. He spoke softly, guiding her through gentle questions. "Can you tell us what scared you?" A long pause, then a whisper. "Someone wanted me gone." "Gone?" where Nolan asked. Leah shook her head. Tears pooled at her lashes. "Did someone tell you that he continued still calm?" Leah hesitated. Her gaze drifted toward the door, the one the nanny had just passed earlier. A flicker of terror crossed her face. One therapist caught the look. "Leah, are you afraid of your nanny?" The child's shoulders curled inward. Nolan didn't press further. Instead, he said softly, "You're safe. No one's taking you anywhere without your say." Across the room beyond the glass, Miranda watched everything, saw everything. Her expression was unreadable, hurt, guilt, awe, fear, all tangled into something heavy. Later, while Nolan took Leah and Jamie out to the garden for air, Miranda stood behind a window on the upper landing. She watched them from a distance, Leah clinging less, laughing once. Jamie showing her how to bounce a pebble across the smooth stone path. Nolan quietly guiding them both. His voice a low reassurance carried on the breeze. Miranda touched her fingers to the glass as if trying to feel what she saw. "When was the last time my daughter smiled like that? When did I last sit with her without checking my phone? When did I forget how small she still is?" Her breath caught as she realized a stranger, a janitor, had made her daughter feel safer than her own mother. Footsteps sounded behind her. Victor. He stepped into her office with the smoothness of someone who believed every room belonged to him. "Miranda, we need to talk." She stiffened. "Not now." "Yes. Now." His tone carried a coldness that sliced through the air. He lowered his voice, but the intensity in it stayed sharp. "That man is a problem," Victor said. "Nolan Reed. He's gaining influence over Leah. Over you." Miranda bristled. He's helping her. He's undermining us, Victor corrected. Undermining you. We cannot afford emotional entanglements with someone who has a documented grievance against the company. Miranda turned sharply. He found my daughter. And now he's inside your home, Victor countered. We don't know what he wants. We don't know what he'll demand. He is a liability. He leaned closer. Either he goes, or you will. The words hit her like a blow. Victor didn't blink. If he stays, you risk losing control of this family and this empire. Make the right choice. He left the room, his footsteps clicking down the hall like a slow, deliberate countdown. Miranda stood frozen, her breath tight, the weight of the estate pressing down on her shoulders. Below, through the window, Nolan tossed a small pebble toward Jamie, who laughed. Leah stood between them, relaxed for the first time since she'd come home. Miranda swallowed hard. Either he goes, or you will. She didn't know yet which choice terrified her more. The mansion was too quiet at night, not peaceful quiet in a way that felt watched, the kind of quiet that settled in Nolan's bones and refused to let go. He'd lived in dozens of places across his lifetime, cramped apartments, aging duplexes, temporary rentals with thin walls, but never had silence felt this heavy. And yet, even in the stillness, things whispered. Not literally, of course. It was the feeling of something wrong, humming beneath the marble floors and high ceilings. Like the house itself was trying to tell him a story. It began with Jamie. He and Leah had disappeared upstairs to play with the toy sets Miranda had hurriedly brought in to ease Leah's transition. Nolan used the rare, quiet moment to wash dishes from their early dinner, listening to the soft trickle of water hitting porcelain. But he could sense it. The house wasn't resting. It was bracing. When Jamie returned, he looked unsettled, a crease pinching the space between his brows. "You okay, bud?" Nolan asked, drying his hands. Jamie hesitated. "Dad, I think I heard something. From where down the hall? Near the back staircase." Jamie glanced over his shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. The nanny was talking to one of the staff, and it sounded weird. Nolan crouched so he was eye level with his son. "What did you hear?" Jamie lowered his voice instinctively. She said something like, "If she goes too far again, we'll lose control of the story." And the other person said, "The plan almost failed the first time." Nolan felt something shift inside him. A quiet click. A puzzle piece sliding into place. "You're sure that's what you heard?" he asked gently. Jamie nodded. "Dad." They knew she ran away, and they didn't sound surprised. There it was, the whisper he had felt since stepping foot in the estate. Something orchestrated. Something rehearsed. Something wrong. Later that evening, Nolan found Miranda alone in her office, hunched over her desk with a posture so tense she looked carved from stone. Her breathing was shallow, the kind people took when they were trying not to fall apart. He knocked lightly. She looked up quickly, too quickly. "Nolan, is Leah okay?" "Did she?" "She's fine," Nolan said. "She's with Jamie." "You scared me," she admitted, exhaling shakily. "These last few days have—" Her voice trailed off as she rubbed her forehead. "What did you need?" Nolan stepped inside. He didn't waste time. "I think the nanny might have been involved in the day Leah disappeared." Miranda blinked. "Hard." "No. She's been with us for years. She's practically family." "I know you trust her," Nolan said gently, "but Leah's scared of her. Not confused, scared. And Jamie overheard part of a conversation tonight. Something about a plan, and about Leah going too far." Miranda's jaw tightened. That could mean anything. It could. Nolan agreed. But, combined with everything else, the open back gate, her behavior around Leah, the way the girl flinches when she walks into a room, that's not nothing. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Miranda finally turned away, staring out the large window overlooking the garden. Lights from the grounds flickered against her face, outlining the exhaustion etched into her features. "I know things look strange," she whispered, "but the people around me, I've had to trust them for years. In this world, loyalty is everything." "Loyalty can hide a lot," Nolan replied softly, "including harm." She sucked in a breath wounded not by his tone but by the truth embedded in it. When she spoke again, her voice was sharper, defensive. "You think you understand this place because you've been here 2 days. No," Nolan said calmly, "but I understand fear. I understand what kids look like when they're trying to protect themselves. Leah is not afraid of being lost, Miranda. She's afraid of being sent somewhere." Miranda flinched. He had struck something real, but instead of letting him in, she straightened eyes, turning colder. "This is not your family. It's not your business. Thank you for your concern, but I need you to stay out of internal matters." Their fragile cooperation cracked. Nolan's expression tightened. "If staying out means ignoring danger to your daughter, then no. I won't do that." Miranda's composure snapped. "You think I don't love my daughter? You think I'd let anyone hurt her?" "No," he said quietly. "I think you've been surrounded by people who've learned how to hide things from you." The words landed like a blow. Nolan turned to leave the air between them, stretched thin with disappointment and fear neither wanted to admit. When the office door clicked shut behind him, Miranda's knees nearly gave out. Her hands trembled as she braced herself against the desk. What if he's right? What if the people I rely on are the very ones who failed her? Her thoughts spiraled. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Finally, with fingers that barely obeyed her, she pulled up the internal security logs. She searched for the footage of the back gate on the day Leah disappeared. She pressed play. What she saw drained the blood from her face. The nanny stood at the gate, looking around, checking her watch, holding Leah's hand, then letting go. Not an accident, not negligence, a choice. Miranda covered her mouth, choking on a breath that broke apart before reaching her lungs. The truth slammed into her with brutal clarity. Loyalty hadn't protected her. It had blinded her. She stared at the screen long after the footage ended, unable to tear herself away, as if watching it again would somehow make it less true. It didn't. Somewhere in the mansion, she heard distant footsteps echo through the hall. Quiet, hollow, like whispers in the walls. The morning sunlight slipped through the towering windows of the Vale mansion, but it couldn't warm the rooms. Not today. Not after what Miranda had seen the night before. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. The footage of the nanny at the back gate replayed in her mind in a loop that scraped raw against her conscience. Yet she walked toward the nanny's quarters with the steady rhythm of someone who knew there was no turning back. When she opened the door, the nanny stood before her hands, clasped polite smile voice, soft and sugar-coated. "Mrs. Vale, is Leah awake? Yet I'd be happy to sit down," Miranda said. The words cut through the air with a sharpness that made the nanny's smile falter. She obeyed, slowly lowering herself into a chair. Miranda remained standing, arms crossed tightly, the hurt inside her simmering just beneath the surface. "I watched the footage," Miranda said. "No emotion, no tremor, just truth delivered like a scalpel." Silence. Then the nanny's face did something subtle. Her expression didn't crack, but it hollowed, the warmth draining from it like water leaving a punctured glass. "I don't know what you think you saw," she began. "I saw you," Miranda said, voice tightening. "I saw you look around. I saw you hold her hand. I saw you let go." The nanny's breath hitched, but she didn't deny it this time. She looked down, fingers twisting together. "I did what I needed to do," she murmured, "for the good of this family, for the company." The hairs at the back of Miranda's neck rose. "Who gave that order?" No response. The silence itself was an admission. Miranda stepped closer. "Did Victor tell you to do it?" The nanny's eyes flickered a single fragile betrayal. That was all the answer Miranda needed. Her voice cracked not with weakness but with heartbreak. "You put my daughter in danger. I put her in controlled danger," the nanny corrected softly, "and That was worse. It was supposed to last only a few minutes, just long enough to shake things up, long enough for the public to see you as vulnerable. It would have strengthened your position. Until she ran farther than expected and everything spiraled. The room spun for a moment. They had used her daughter, her little girl. Miranda's breath grew ragged. "Get out of this house." The nanny stood finally shaken. "I only did what the board believed necessary. What Victor believed necessary." Miranda pointed toward the door. "If I ever see you near Leah again, I will bury this entire empire before I let you breathe the same air as my daughter. Get out." The nanny left without another word. Downstairs, Nolan sat at the dining table with a coffee mug clasped between both hands. He looked like a man wrestling with too many truths at once. After the argument with Miranda the night before, he'd considered packing up and leaving this place behind. He knew how these worlds worked. Power protected power. People like him were always the casualties. But then, Leah had woken early panic shooting through her little body when she realized Nolan wasn't in the room. She'd bolted down the hall until she saw him sitting there. Only then did her breathing steady. She needed him. And Nolan Reed could walk away from many things in life, but not from a child who trusted him. Jamie joined him at the table, chewing on a piece of toast. "Dad," he said hesitantly. "Are we staying here for now?" Nolan replied. "Until we know she's safe." Jamie nodded, relieved. A few minutes later, a knock sounded at the doorframe. Miranda stood there, pale, stiff fingers twisting nervously against her palm. "Mr. Reed," she said, "we need to talk." Nolan exchanged a glance with Jamie, then followed her into a smaller sitting room. The door clicked shut with a soft, ominous sound. Miranda faced him. Her voice came out low, softer than he'd ever heard it. "I owe you an apology." Nolan's brows lifted. "I saw the footage," she said. "The nanny. She wasn't negligent. She was acting under someone's direction." A tremor rippled through her voice. "Under Victor's direction." Nolan inhaled slowly. "You confronted her?" "Yes." Miranda swallowed, and she admitted it. For a moment, Nolan just listened to the faint ticking of the wall clock. He could feel the ache in Miranda's confession, an ache rooted not in power or pride, but in betrayal. "I should have believed you," she said quietly. "About the signs, about Leah's fear, about the people around me." Her gaze dropped. "I'm not used to being wrong." Nolan nodded once. "Welcome to humanity." A small, humorless breath escaped her. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "I need your help," she said. Nolan blinked. "With what?" "With everything." Miranda paced heels, clicking softly against the wood. "With understanding Leah. With figuring out who I can trust. With cleaning the rot inside my company. I want you at a risk assessment meeting at Vale Tower this afternoon. As an outside set of eyes." "Miranda," he said gently, "I'm a janitor." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You're a father who sees through things. Someone who knows what fear looks like. Someone who doesn't bow to money." Her eyes locked onto his. "That's exactly what I need." There was honesty in her voice that Nolan hadn't heard before, a tremble that said she was stepping into unknown territory and was terrified of doing it alone. After a long pause, Nolan nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll help." Relief washed briefly across her face, a fleeting, fragile moment before the world tightened its grip around them again. Vale Tower buzzed with activity when Nolan stepped inside that afternoon. The clicking of keyboards, the murmur of financial analysts, the crisp sound of files being sorted. Every noise seemed sharpened by tension. Miranda introduced him not as a janitor, but as a consultant for victim impact assessment. A few eyebrows rose. None dared challenge her. During the meeting, Nolan sat quietly observing. Charts flashed on screens, graphs of rising payouts, legal claims, internal disputes. The language was polished but hollow, stripped of the human beings buried beneath those numbers. Then a stack of folders slid across the table. Just paperwork, just statistics, until he saw it. A name. One he'd lived with, grieved over, survived in spite of. Emily Reed, his wife. His breath stopped. His grip tightened on the folder until his knuckles paled. But he didn't open it. Not yet. Later that night, long after the meeting ended, Miranda sat alone in her office. She sifted through old case files, flipping stiff papers under the glow of a desk lamp. Then she found it. The same name. Emily Reed. Denied claim. Deceased. Her heart dropped. Emily Reed was his Emily. Her hands trembled as she closed the file. Her father's company had played a role in the worst moment of Nolan Reed's life. The office was too still for a place where fortunes rose and fell every hour. Miranda sat alone beneath the muted glow of the desk lamp, the hum of the city far below barely audible. Her fingertips hovered over the name printed on the folder as though touching it would make everything inside real. Emily Reed. She opened the file. At first it was just paper clinical lines, bland summaries, numbers typed without care. But then, as she turned each page, the details bled into each other like a story that had been screaming for years, but no one bothered to hear. Diagnosis: late-stage autoimmune failure. Treatment estimate denied. Appeal letter unresolved. Financial hardship extreme. Miranda swallowed as she read the brief note scrawled in the margin. Someone had scribbled "not cost-effective" next to Emily's request for extended treatment. Her stomach twisted. Then she reached the final document. A letter, handwritten, ink smudged in places. To whom it may concern. Please reconsider. My husband Nolan is trying everything. We have a little boy who needs his mother. I don't want to leave him alone in this world. I just need more time. I'm fighting. I promise, I'm fighting. Emily Reed. The loops in the handwriting were shaky but full of love, full of hope, full of fear. Miranda's throat closed. She pressed the letter to her chest and felt something in her break. Nolan hadn't told her any of this, not the depth of it, not the pieces that bore her signature, her initials approving old policy standards she'd barely understood at the time. Emily's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was one her company helped carve. And now the man who saved her daughter, the man who refused every bribe, every dismissal, was the same man who lost everything because of her. Her breath shook as she whispered into the quiet, "What have we done?" The next morning, Miranda found Nolan in the temporary guest quarters, the sunlight catching the tired lines around his eyes. He was repairing a loose button on Jamie's shirt, simple slow movements like he was trying to steady his own breathing. "Nolan," she said softly. He looked up, meeting her gaze with calm caution. She held the file against her chest like a confession. "Can we talk?" she asked. Jamie sensed the seriousness immediately. "I'll go find Leah," he murmured, slipping out. The door closed with a soft click. Miranda stepped forward and placed the file on the coffee table between them. She didn't sit, not yet. It felt wrong to take comfort when she was the cause of someone else's pain. "I read it," she said. "All of it." Nolan's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened not with anger but with a kind of familiar grief. "You weren't supposed to know," he murmured. "You were supposed to," Miranda replied, voice trembling. "Someone should have heard you. Someone should have listened." Nolan gave a hollow laugh, quiet but sharp as broken glass. "That's the thing about systems like yours. They don't listen. They calculate." Miranda winced. He wasn't wrong. Seeing the guilt on her face, he softened just barely. "Look, I don't blame you for not knowing. I blame the system. I blame the culture your father created. I blame myself for believing the appeals had any chance." Miranda hugged her arms around her body. "I want to defend myself. I want to say I wasn't really in charge then. I want to say I was still being shaped by people who believed profit mattered more than people." Her voice cracked. "But none of that changes what happened to Emily. And none of that makes your pain smaller." She sank into the armchair across from him, the weight of remorse pulling her down. "I can resign," she whispered, "if that's what you want. I will. I'll step down. I'll take responsibility publicly. I won't hide." The room seemed to inhale in surprise. Nolan stared at her, stunned. For a long moment he didn't say a word. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, steady, heavy, conflicted. Finally he spoke. "If you quit," he said slowly, "if you take the fall and run, then nothing changes. The ones who hurt Emily won't face consequences. The system won't shift even an inch. You'll be gone, but the machine will stay." Miranda looked up, eyes glistening. "Then what do you want from me?" she asked. "A fight," Nolan said quietly. "Not a resignation." She blinked. "A fight? Yes." His voice was stronger now. A fight to fix this. A fight to stop what happened to Emily from happening to another family. A fight to tear down every cruel policy that rewards denial over compassion. He leaned back, breath unsteady. "If you walk away, the people who built this machine win. Victor wins. But if you stay, and you face the truth, and you rebuild piece by piece, then maybe Emily's story won't be wasted." For a moment, Miranda couldn't breathe. He wasn't asking for vengeance. He wasn't asking for power. He was asking for change. And somehow, that was heavier than any punishment she had braced for. Her voice wavered. "I don't know if I can." "You can." Nolan said, steady as stone. "But only if you stop surrounding yourself with people who thrive on fear and silence." Miranda's hands trembled. "You hate me," she whispered. "I don't," Nolan said gently. "I hate what happened. I hate what your company did. But you—" His voice softened. "You're trying. And that counts for something." Miranda pressed her trembling hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. It was the closest thing to forgiveness she had received in years, and it wasn't even forgiveness. It was belief. Tentative. Fragile. Real. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. "Then, help me, Nolan. Help me be better." He hesitated. Then he nodded. Not for her, not for the Vale Empire, but for Emily. And for the little girl sleeping down the hall who trusted him with her life. The clock ticked softly in the background, marking a fragile shifting peace. But deep within the Vale estate, hidden in emails and closed-door meetings in the shadowed corners where power moved unseen, the storm that awaited them was already gathering. The days that followed reshaped the atmosphere inside the Vale mansion. Nothing was said outright yet, everything had changed. A quiet, unspoken truth threaded through the halls. Miranda and Nolan were no longer opponents circling each other. They were something far rarer, far more volatile. They were allies, not comfortable ones, not trusting ones, but necessary ones. Miranda arrived early each morning at the newly established risk rehabilitation room, her attempt at turning a corner inside a company built on corners. She would glance at the mirror, take a breath that sounded almost like a prayer, and step inside. Nolan was always already there. Not because he had to be, but because Leah slept better knowing he was close, because Jamie felt safer having him nearby, and because deep down, Nolan sensed the fight ahead required a steadiness Miranda wasn't used to leaning on. Together, they spent long hours reviewing internal policies, denied claims cases buried under years of bureaucratic indifference. Miranda read each one as if it were a confession, her expressions tightening with every story. Nolan watched quietly. He'd lived inside the fallout of those decisions. He knew the human cost behind every digit and denial code. "You're seeing it now," he said softly one afternoon when she paused over a file with trembling hands. Miranda shut her eyes. "I'm seeing what I didn't want to see. That's where change starts." She didn't look at him, but she nodded. Outside the meeting rooms, life took on a strange, almost tender rhythm. Miranda tried, awkwardly hesitantly, to learn how to be present with her daughter again. She joined Leah and Jamie for simple activities, card games, drawing, even the occasional messy attempt at cooking. And though she often fumbled burning toast over mixing batter misunderstanding punchlines, Leah began to soften around her. One evening, Nolan watched from the doorway as Miranda sat cross-legged on the floor, listening intently while Leah explained the difference between ballet slippers and pointe shoes. It was such a small, ordinary moment, but something about the softness in Miranda's posture made Nolan's chest tighten. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing. She was learning how to mother again. Jamie leaned close to Nolan and whispered, "She's trying." "Yeah," Nolan murmured. "She is." It surprised him how much that mattered, but not everyone welcomed the change. Victor watched from the sidelines, his silence colder than any outburst. His disdain for Nolan simmered just beneath the surface. One afternoon, he cornered Nolan in the hallway outside Miranda's study. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus cleaner, but beneath it was something sharp like tension, wearing a cologne of its own. "Enjoying your stay?" Victor asked, tone smooth as ice. Nolan didn't respond. Victor continued, "You should know I have extensive files on anyone who touches this family. Anyone. Including you, Mr. Reed." Nolan's jaw tightened. "I don't scare easily. You should." Victor slipped a folder from under his arm and tapped it lightly. "Your debts. Your incident in the bar after your wife passed. Your reduced credit score. Your therapist's notes." He gave a cold smile. "Your life fits conveniently into a narrative of instability." Nolan's stomach dropped not from fear, but from the sheer audacity. "You're planning something," Nolan said quietly. Victor stepped closer. "I don't need to plan anything. I simply wait for men like you to collapse under their own history." "But you're wrong about him." The voice came from behind them. "Miranda." Victor tensed. She stepped forward, eyes sharp, no longer softened by guilt. "Nolan is the reason Leah smiles again. The reason she sleeps without screaming. And he's the only one in this house who tells me the truth." Victor's expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough to show the hit had landed. "You're allowing yourself to be manipulated," he snapped. "No," Miranda said. "I'm allowing myself to wake up." Victor held her gaze for a long, electric moment. Then he pivoted sharply and stormed off, the click of his shoes echoing like a warning. Miranda let out a breath she'd been holding. Nolan watched her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. "You didn't have to defend me." "I wasn't defending you," she said softly. "I was defending what's right." Something unspoken passed between them. Not romantic, not yet. Something deeper, an acknowledgement of shared responsibility, shared wounds, shared hope. That evening, the four of them, Miranda, Nolan, Leah, and Jamie, gathered around the large but rarely used kitchen table. It held mismatched plates and half-eaten spaghetti, the result of Miranda's attempt at cooking without supervision. Leah giggled at the over-salted sauce. Jamie offered to teach Miranda how to make real tomato basil next time. Nolan just shook his head, amusement in his voice. It was imperfect, chaotic, human, and for a brief moment it felt like a family. Later, after the kids had run off to play, Miranda lingered in the doorway beside Nolan. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me that. Normal is still possible." He looked at her, a woman more complicated than he'd realized. A woman unraveling decades of armor, one thread at a time. "Normal isn't what you think it is," he said gently. "It's not perfection. It's trying again the next day. And the next." Miranda's eyes softened. Then the moment broke. The television in the living room had auto-switched to the evening news. A panel of financial analysts appeared on screen, their voices crisp and cold. "Sources say Miranda Vale is being influenced by an ex-client with a documented grievance against the company. Nolan Reed could be using his daughter's disappearance as leverage, a dangerous instability at the top of Vale Assurance." Nolan's face appeared on the screen, grainy, zoomed in from a photograph scraped off social media years ago. Miranda froze. Jamie ran in from the hallway. Leah covered her ears. Victor's shadowed figure flashed briefly across the screen in a clip from a conference, his expression unreadable. The broadcast cut back to the anchor. In short, the CEO may be compromised. Silence fell heavy as snow. Miranda's breath hitched. Nolan felt a familiar dread crawl up his spine. And, somewhere miles away, Victor likely smiled. The Empire was cracking. And the storm they feared was no longer coming. It had arrived. By sunrise, the storm had reached every corner of America. News vans camped along the sidewalks outside Vail Tower like vultures waiting for something to die. Helicopters thumped overhead. Talk shows replayed the same 10-second clip of Nolan entering the building slowed down, zoomed in, dissected by people who had never lost anything real in their lives. By 8 o'clock, Nolan's face, stern, tired, and taken from an unflattering angle, was plastered across every screen at the estate. Jamie sat frozen on the couch. Leah clung to his arm, shaking. Nolan stood behind them, jaw tight, breath shallow. The TV blared. A grieving widower with motives still unclear, possibly leveraging his tragic past against Miranda Vail. Psychological instability after his wife's denied claim. And then, is this man manipulating the CEO of Vail Assurance? Miranda appeared at the stairs, pale with disbelief. Manipulating, she whispered. Nolan exhaled hard through his nose. They're crafting a narrative. Jamie looked up at his father, terrified. Dad, are they going to arrest you? No, Nolan answered immediately. Steady, grounded. No one's arresting anyone. But inside he felt the old familiar tightening, the sensation of a world too big, too loud, turning its attention onto him with claws out. Miranda stepped closer, her voice cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. It's Victor, Nolan said. He's pulling strings. As if summoned by his name, Miranda's phone buzzed. A text. Boardroom emergency meeting. 10:00 a.m. No excuses. Victor. She locked the screen quickly as though it burned her. The mansion's living room became command central. Advisors arrived in suits that matched the stiffness in their voices. Lawyers crowded around Miranda. Phones rang. Papers rustled. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like another presence, one with cold hands pressed against everyone's spine. A lawyer spoke first. Miranda. With respect, you must distance yourself immediately. Distance, Miranda repeated, stunned. Yes, he said firmly. From Mr. Reed. From any admission of wrongdoing. From the denied claims controversy. We can argue he coerced you in a moment of emotional distress. Nolan's expression darkened. Miranda's eyes flashed with something between grief and fury. You think I'm going to blame him for my failures, she demanded. That is precisely what you must do, the lawyer insisted, if you want to keep your position. Another advisor chimed in. Your reputation is cracking. The board thinks you're compromised. If you cut ties publicly now, you may still survive the vote. And if I don't, Miranda asked, then Victor wins. A thick silence followed. Across the room, Leah tugged on Nolan's sleeve, her little voice trembling. Are they taking you away from us? Nolan knelt down. No one's taking me anywhere. But the truth was more fragile than he wanted to admit. Miranda's gaze drifted to them, her daughter clinging to the only person who'd made her feel safe, and the man who had carried a truth she never bothered to look for. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. When she opened them again, her voice was barely a whisper. Nolan. I'm sorry. All of this is happening because of me. No, he said gently. It's happening because Victor got scared. Jamie frowned. Scared of what? That your dad tells the truth, Miranda said softly. At 9:15, the legal team pulled Miranda aside for a last attempt at persuasion. Say nothing about the denied claims history. Nothing about Nolan's wife, one lawyer drilled. You admit any fault, you lose everything. You must deny emotional involvement, another insisted. Say you were misled. Miranda's hands shook. Misled, she echoed. By a man who saved my daughter's life. The lawyers exchanged a calculated glance. Your career depends on it. Her breath stuttered. For a moment she felt small again, like the 22-year-old girl who inherited a company she didn't yet understand, coached by men who treated her like a figurehead. But she wasn't that girl anymore. Not after Leah's fear. Not after seeing Emily's letter. Not after seeing Nolan sacrifice pride for truth over and over. She straightened. I'll speak for myself. The lawyers sighed, defeated. They couldn't control her anymore. Before leaving for the boardroom, Miranda found Nolan in the quiet corner of the hallway. His hands were tucked into his jacket pockets, but she could tell he was trying to steady himself. She stepped closer. You shouldn't have to take the heat for this, he said. I'm the CEO, she replied. It's my job to take the heat, and I'm the one who cost you your reputation. No, she corrected softly. You're the one who forced me to see the truth. There was a long pause, one filled not with romantic tension, but with something deeper, mutual recognition. A bond forged in shared hurt. A loyalty born from hard honesty. A partnership neither of them planned. I'm not letting them throw you under the bus, Miranda whispered. And I'm not letting them destroy you to get to me, he said. Something fragile passed between them. Something that felt almost like trust. At 9:57 a.m., Miranda stood before the cameras for a brief statement. The microphones were cold. The lights were harsh. The reporters' murmurs buzzed like insects. She inhaled slowly. When she spoke, the entire room went still. I will not distance myself from the truth, she began. Veil assurance has caused real harm. Families have suffered, including the family of a man who saved my daughter. The reporters jolted. The lawyers paled. Miranda continued, voice gaining strength. My company failed him, and I will not pretend otherwise to preserve my title. She paused, and I will not abandon the people who helped me see that truth. Her gaze flicked intentionally, unapologetically toward Nolan standing in the wings. Gasps rippled across the room. Victor, watching from the back, looked like he'd swallowed ice. This ends now, Miranda said. The denials, the corruption, the silence, all of it. The cameras flashed. The battle lines were drawn. Back at the mansion, as she stepped off the podium, Miranda felt the weight of what she'd done settle onto her chest. Nolan stepped closer, voice low and steady. That took guts. It might cost me everything, she whispered. Maybe he said, but it might save something too. She exhaled, shaky, frightened, proud. But before she could speak, her phone vibrated violently. A message from the board's internal line. Emergency session. Immediate motion to remove Miranda as CEO. Her blood ran cold. The storm wasn't ending. It was only beginning. The boardroom at Vale Tower had always been a room of power-polished wood glass walls and a silence so controlled it felt rehearsed. But today, that silence was different. Heavy. Expectant. Like the air itself was bracing for a verdict. Miranda stood outside the tall double doors, her breath-shallow pulse steadying only because she forced it to. Nolan stayed a few feet behind her, not quite part of this world yet, somehow the only person in it she trusted to tell her the truth. You don't have to be here, she whispered without turning. Yes, Nolan said quietly. I do. She swallowed, nodded once, then pushed open the doors. Inside, the 12 members of the Vale board sat in a semicircle suit's crisp expressions carved from stone. At the center sat Charles Redwood, the chairman, a man whose gravitas had once intimidated Miranda as a young executive, and still did even now when she stood with more scars and more courage. Victor was there too. He sat with his fingers-steepled posture relaxed as if he were already enjoying the aftermath of the battle he'd engineered. Miranda took her place. The door clicked shut behind her. The chair of legal compliance began immediately, his tone sharp and clinical. This emergency session concerns allegations against CEO Miranda Vale for misconduct, poor judgment, and potential compromise of fiduciary duty. Miranda's stomach clenched, but she kept her spine straight. A second board member chimed in. Your press statement this morning has caused the stock to fall another 8%. Investors are demanding answers. Then Victor stood. We have evidence, he said, projecting calm authority, that Ms. Vale has been unduly influenced by an outside actor with a personal vendetta against the company. Every eye turned toward Nolan, who remained near the back of the room. Victor continued. This man lost his wife after a denied claim. A tragedy, yes, but he has motive, and now he has access to the CEO, to her home, to her daughter. The implication hit like a blade. Miranda's hands curled into fists. Don't you dare drag Leah into this. Victor ignored her. We have footage of him entering the building, internal reports of him attending confidential meetings. He is not an employee. He is not a consultant. He is a man with a grudge, and Ms. Vale has allowed him influence far beyond what is appropriate. Nolan felt the familiar tightness in his throat, the kind that came when the world decided his story for him. Miranda stepped forward. Nolan Reed is here because my daughter would not speak without him, because he helped uncover the truth about what happened to her, because he has been honest when no one else dared. Victor raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think this is honesty? He opened a folder, sliding out printed screenshots, news headlines, twisting Nolan's past photos of him at his lowest moments after Emily's death. His record shows instability, Victor said. His financials reflect hardship severe enough to create motive. His proximity to the CEO is a risk. The board murmured. Miranda's heart hammered. Stop twisting this. Nolan didn't manipulate me. He didn't ask for anything. He has destroyed your objectivity, Victor cut in. You admitted wrongdoing on national television. You jeopardized years of corporate stability because a stranger whispered guilt into your ear. Miranda inhaled sharply, pain and fury colliding inside her. That's enough. Chairman Redwood raised a hand. The room fell silent. Mr. Reed. Step forward. Nolan hesitated, then walked to the center of the room. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, but his voice remained steady. Whatever you've heard, he said quietly, whatever Victor has spun, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because a little girl was terrified and because no one in this building saw the truth until she ran into my arms. A board member scoffed. Touching, but irrelevant. Nolan didn't flinch. You want to know if I hate this company? Yes, I do. It cost my wife her life. It cost my son his mother. But I didn't set foot in this tower to burn it down. I came because Miranda was finally willing to face what the rest of you won't. Victor stepped closer. Do you deny that you've been influencing her decisions? No, Nolan said. I've been telling her the truth. And she listened. Another ripple spread around the table. Redwood leaned forward. Mr. Reed, the board questions whether your involvement poses a threat to the company. Nolan met his gaze. The problem isn't that I'm a threat. The problem is that I remind you of everyone you've forgotten. Silence swept the room so sharp it felt like it sliced the air. Victor recovered first. This is emotional manipulation. No, Nolan replied, voice like iron. This is what your policies look like in human form. Miranda watched him with a pain-filled pride that tightened her chest. Victor turned back to the board. As you can see, he is consumed by personal grievance. His presence is destabilizing the CEO. Therefore, I motion that Ms. Vale be removed from her position effective immediately. The board murmured again, agreement, hesitation, uncertainty mixing together. Redwood lifted his gavel. Prepare for the vote. Miranda's pulse surged. This was it, the moment that determined whether she could save her company or be forced out of it. On the edge of the room, Nolan felt helpless for the first time since stepping into this mess. He had spoken with truth, but truth didn't always win in rooms like these. And then the doors burst open. Every head turned. Jamie stood in the doorway, chest heaving, and beside him, Leah. Small, brave, terrified, determined. Redwood's voice boomed. "Young lady, you can't be here. This is a private meeting." Leah stepped forward anyway, her voice trembling but strong enough to cut through the high ceilings. "You're talking about me," she said. "I think I can be here." Gasps rippled through the boardroom. Miranda pressed a hand to her mouth. Nolan's heart stopped altogether. Leah continued walking tiny feet echoing in a room built to intimidate giants. But she wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. She had come to speak the truth no one else could. For a moment, the entire room froze. 12 board members, 3 attorneys, Victor, with his wolf-like stare, and Miranda, standing at the center of a storm she did not create, but was determined to finish. All of them stared at the small girl stepping further into the boardroom, her braids slightly uneven, her sneakers squeaking softly on the polished floor. Leah's voice trembled, but she kept going. "You're talking about me. So I should be here." Miranda's breath broke. She moved toward her daughter instinctively, but stopped halfway. Leah wasn't reaching for her. She was stepping forward on her own. Nolan placed a steady hand on Jamie's shoulder, silently urging him to stay back. This was Leah's moment. Her truth. Chairman Redwood cleared his throat, struggling to regain control. "Young lady, this is a closed corporate proceeding. You cannot." "I can." Leah whispered, then lifted her chin. "Because you're making decisions about my mom, and about the man who saved me." The boardroom fell into a stunned hush. Redwood lowered his gavel. Let the child speak. Even he knew no PR strategy, no legal maneuver, no corporate script could silence a frightened child telling the truth. Miranda watched with her hand pressed against her heart. Leah walked to the center of the room, small and trembling but unshakably brave. Her voice came out thin at first like a violin string stretched too tight. "I didn't run away because I was lost. I ran away because I was scared." Victor's jaw tightened. A dangerous flicker crossed his expression, panic quickly masked. One board member leaned forward skeptically. "Scared of what, sweetheart? Not what?" Leah swallowed hard. "Who?" She looked toward the door where the nanny used to stand during family events. Even now, just the memory made her shrink. "She told me," Leah whispered, "that Mommy didn't want me anymore. That I was going away. Somewhere far. Somewhere I wouldn't be a problem." Miranda flinched as though struck. Tears welled, shaking her whole frame. Leah continued, voice quivering. "I thought, if I didn't go back, maybe Mommy would come find me. Maybe she would still want me." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. Victor stepped forward abruptly. "This is emotional manipulation. The child is confused." "No, I'm not," Leah shouted, startling everyone. She pointed a trembling finger at him. "You're the one who made her say those things. You're the one who told people to watch me and take me outside that day." Victor's mask cracked just for a blink, but enough. A board member whispered to another, "Is she saying what I think she's saying?" Another murmured, "He staged it. For influence." Jamie stepped forward, now voice shaky but firm. "I heard them. The nanny and another man. They said the plan was almost ruined, and that they had to control the story." The attorneys exchanged frantic glances. Miranda turned toward Victor, betrayal burning behind her eyes. "You used my daughter." Victor's composure snapped. "It was necessary," he hissed. "The company needed a shake-up, a narrative reset. Your position was slipping. Investors were restless. This was a chance to gain sympathy and regain control." "You risked her life," Miranda whispered, horrified. "It was a controlled scenario," Victor snapped. "Or it would have been had she not run farther than expected. And had this man," he jabbed a finger toward Nolan, "not inserted himself into our business." Nolan didn't move, didn't speak. He let Victor unravel himself. One board member slammed a hand on the table. "You orchestrated the disappearance of a child for corporate leverage." Victor stiffened. "For the greater stability of Veil Assurance." Leah whimpered. Miranda rushed to her kneeling, wrapping her in her arms. "You were never going anywhere," she whispered fiercely. "Not now. Not ever. I love you. I love you so much. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." Nolan looked away, giving them space because some healing didn't need witnesses. When Miranda rose again, she was no longer the trembling executive who feared losing her crown. She was a mother. She was a leader. She was done being quiet. "I have something to say," she announced, stepping before the board. The room quieted instantly. Miranda drew in a slow breath. "I allowed policies to exist that hurt families. I approved procedures I didn't fully understand. People like Emily Reed suffered because this company valued profit over compassion." Redwood lifted an eyebrow. "Ms. Vale, be careful. Admissions of wrongdoing." "I'm done being careful." Her voice steadied strong enough to hold the weight of a broken empire. "I'm done hiding behind lawyers and shareholders. We failed. I failed. So here's what I propose." She laid out her plan with deliberate, unwavering clarity. Eliminating denial-based incentive structures. Establishing a third-party oversight committee. Creating a compassion-first claims initiative. Funding the Emily Reed Foundation, named for the woman the company failed raising support for families facing medical crises. Gasps echoed. Shock. Awe. Fear. Miranda continued, "This company will change, and if you want me to lead it, then I lead it honestly. Not with half-truths, not with secrecy, not with manipulation." Her gaze sliced toward Victor, and not with people who harm children to maintain power. The room erupted whispers, outrage, confusion. Redwood lifted his gavel. Order. He surveyed Miranda, then Victor, then Nolan, then the trembling child beside her. Finally he spoke. "We vote." The air tightened as slips were cast. Silent. Heavy. Irrevocable. Nolan's pulse drummed in his ears. Leah clutched Miranda's hand. Jamie stood stiff beside Nolan, holding his breath. One by one, the votes were tallied. When Redwood read the final outcome, the room held its breath. By a narrow margin, Miranda Vale will remain CEO. Miranda exhaled, collapsing into a shaky breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Victor lunged forward. "This is absurd. She is compromised. She is enough," Redwood snapped. "You will face internal investigation for orchestrating the child endangerment." Victor paled. For once he had no words. But the victory was not clean. It was not gentle. It was not final. Because the next blow came quietly from Miranda's remaining attorney. He approached Nolan with a folder. For closure, the lawyer said carefully, "We'd like to offer you a settlement package, substantial compensation for your wife's case. If you accept this, ends the matter." He held out the document. Nolan stared at it, then at Miranda, then back at the file. His breath felt heavy, his voice even heavier. "If I take money to stay quiet, then I'm no better than the people who let her die." The words struck the room with a force no gavel could match. The community center smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh paint, a scent Nolan had grown strangely fond of. It wasn't the glossed-over sterility of corporate hallways or the stale scent of old policy binders. It was warm, honest, a testimony to something being built, not taken. Above the front entrance hung a wooden plaque, its letters burned carefully into the grain. Emily Reed Community Center, Hope has a home here. Every time Nolan walked under it, his breath caught not with grief, but with gratitude. His wife's name no longer lived in a forgotten file buried under legal jargon and denial stamps. It lived here where children laughed, where families got help navigating impossible moments, where no one was told they were too expensive to save. Inside, he could hear the rhythmic bouncing of a basketball hitting the polished wooden floor, a chorus of sneakers squeaking, the burst of laughter from a girl trying to make her first shot, voices layered with echo-life movement. It was everything the boardroom had lacked, and everything Nolan had never expected to find again. He walked through the lobby nodding at volunteers, social workers, and parents. He carried no title beyond community liaison, but people listened when he spoke. Not because he was powerful, because he had lived the kind of pain they feared and survived it. He found Miranda in one of the small conference rooms just off the gym. The door was slightly ajar and he paused, listening before stepping in. Her voice was soft, more human than he'd ever heard it inside Vale Tower. No, we don't deny them. We guide them. We connect them to funding partners and emergency aid. Compassion first. Policy second. A short silence followed, then the hum of gratitude from someone on the other end of the phone. Miranda ended the call gently. Only then did she notice him. "You're early," she said, smiling with that mix of pride and shyness she'd grown into these past months. "I wanted to check on the new intake program," Nolan replied. "But looks like you already beat me to it." She shrugged lightly. "Old habits die hard. I'm still learning to let go of the urge to fix everything myself." "You're not fixing everything," Nolan corrected gently. "You're building something different." Her gaze softened. "And I wouldn't have gotten here without you." Nolan didn't answer, not because he disagreed, but because the acknowledgement stirred something deep, something tender he wasn't ready to name out loud. Before the moment could swell too far, a burst of laughter echoed from the gym. Leah's voice rose above the others. "Jamie, you cheated!" Jamie shouted back, "You just can't block my shot." Miranda exhaled a laugh, one hand tugging her hair behind her ear. "They've become inseparable." "Yeah," Nolan murmured, "like brother and sister." He didn't add the next thought aloud, and maybe one day we'll be more than what we are now. It was too fragile, too new, too precious to rush. She glanced toward the gym, then at him again. "Want to join them in a minute?" Nolan hesitated. "There's something I've been meaning to ask." Miranda tilted her head. "What's that?" He drew a breath, feeling the weight and lightness of honesty collide. "Do you ever worry you won't live up to everything you've promised to this center, to the new policies, to the people who depend on you?" Her gaze faltered, then steadied. Every day, she admitted softly. "But I'd rather be afraid while doing the right thing than comfortable while doing nothing." The answer hit him with a warmth he didn't expect, a warmth that felt like trust. "And you," she asked quietly, "do you ever worry you'll carry Emily's memory like a wound instead of a gift?" Nolan's chest tightened. He had spent years unable to imagine such a question, even less the answer. But here with her, he could finally say it. Some days, yes. But now, the hurt feels like a reminder. Not of what I lost, but of what I still have to offer. Miranda's eyes glistened not with pity, but with something far deeper. "Emily would be proud," she whispered. He didn't cry, but something unclenched in him, something long locked behind years of anger and survival. They walked to the gym together. Leah and Jamie were mid-argument about whether traveling counted in a friendly game. A volunteer referee had long given up enforcing the rules. When the kids saw them both lit up. Dad Miranda. "Come play." Jamie called, bouncing the ball toward them. Miranda raised her brows at Nolan. "You up for a challenge? You know, I'm terrible at basketball." "Perfect," she teased. "You'll match my skill level." He laughed, a sound he didn't recognize at first, deep, unburdened, alive. The game was chaotic, full of missed shots and exaggerated groans. Leah squealed every time she dribbled successfully. Jamie trash-talked with the confidence of a seasoned athlete. Miranda tried so hard to follow the rules that she tripped over her own feet twice. It was messy. It was loud. It was real. And Nolan felt something blooming inside him, something he thought had died the night Emily did. Belonging. When the game finally ended in a tie after Nolan accidentally scored on the wrong hoop, they all spilled into the small kitchenette beside the gym. The clink of cups, the soft fizz of the soda machine, kids giggling as they spilled popcorn everywhere. Miranda washed a bowl at the sink while Nolan dried it. Their hands brushed just lightly but enough to send a quiet current through the air. She glanced at him, cheeks warming. "Tonight," she said softly, "would you and Jamie like to come over for dinner? Nothing formal, nothing heavy, just a meal, a home, if you'd want that." Nolan looked at her, not at the CEO, not at the woman who had once signed a policy that shattered his world, but at the person who had fought to rebuild something better from the rubble. And for the first time he didn't feel like he was betraying Emily by stepping forward into the future. "I'd like that," he said. A smile spread across her face, uncertain, hopeful, honest. In the gym, Leah and Jamie called out, "We're starting a new game without you." Nolan chuckled, setting the towel aside. He glanced at Miranda. "You can't change what happened to Emily," he said quietly, meaning every word. "But you're changing everything after that." Miranda's eyes softened with something that felt like sunrise. Together they stepped back into the noise, the warmth, the possibility. Not a perfect family. Not yet, but a beginning. A beginning built on truth, on healing, on the kind of wealth that couldn't be counted on any corporate ledger. Hope, love, second chances. And as they rejoined the laughter of two children who believed the world could be safe again, the story closed not with an ending, but with a promise. A promise that this time everyone would be held, everyone would matter, everyone would come home. And that, my friends, is the story of how an ordinary man, a grieving father, and a powerful woman, carrying her own silent wounds, found a way to rebuild a world broken by fear, loss, and pride. A reminder that healing doesn't always come from the places we expect. Sometimes it comes from a stranger's kindness, a child's courage, or the moment we finally decide to tell the truth. If this story touched you, I hope it also reminded you of something important. We are all capable of change. We are all capable of choosing compassion. And every one of us carries a light that can help someone else find their way home. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment of unexpected kindness? Have you, or someone you love, ever been lifted up by a second chance? Or maybe you simply felt connected to a part of this journey. Please share your story in the comments below. Your words may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And while you're here, let me know where you're watching from. Our little community has grown across states, countries, and time zones, and I always love seeing how far our stories travel. If this video brought you comfort, inspiration, or even one moment of hope, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. It helps our stories reach more people who might need them. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending your time with this story. Your presence here means more than you know. Until the next journey, take care of yourself and take care of each other.